Hi everyone. I haven't done this for a while, so basically I'm gonna throw myself in at the deep end, and I'm gonna read a short story. It's from a slightly bigger story called The Rocking Chair, and this section is called The Calling, and this is the present day. Dermot heard a song that he loved dearly on the radio, and wanted to listen to it the whole way through before leaving his house. His heart warmed to the words. She lit a fire, and now she's in every thought. But soon enough his coat was on him, and he was leaving through the front door with his dog, Ellie. Songs have a way of setting the mood, and Dermot was pensive. He closes his front door behind him, clunk, click. Then Ellie started to pull on the lead, yanking his arm, as if from his sockets. Stop pulling, Ellie. Dermot pulled up his hood to shelter from the blustery morning. Low, fast-moving clouds with the wind harp catching the cables of the pylons as he walked past. The echoing reverberation drone poured a steady, haunting sound as the cables split the wind in two. Dermot looked up into the morning moody sky with a shiver through his bones. But Ellie danced to every movement, rustle, chasing a leaf scuttering across the ground in a giddy, silly-hearted motion. Her paws slapped down to trap what she could catch. A playful exploration, not wanting to know why the leaf moved, only the process of being there in that moment. Thus, round and about was no longer scary. Ellie bravely went into the thicket as they walked through a small wooded area. Soon enough they turned onto the path that led them down to the shoreline and onto the beach. Bits of rain in spittle droplets whirled around in the air. The clouds moved on so sudden and quick, not even the rain could linger. Though another dark grey cloud rolled past, casting doubt. Dermot's dog, barking profusely, brought him back to here and now. His feet finally met sand, which had thin, damp top layer, and underneath still dry. After all, this was the first rainfall in 2 weeks, and as he placed his feet on the sand, it broke with the damp layer rolling back in balls and clumps, which revealed the drier part. Dermot looked up as he heard the waves crash in the distance. The usual rocks lay scattered, sighted from the far-out tide, to distantly calling to the land with echoing roars of the rolling waves churning and frothing through the rocks. Not a soul was in sight this morning. Perhaps the weather put the people off. But it did not deter Dermot as he braced what he could with his eyes trying to hug the unknown, maybe to what could have been. The sight of rubbish loitered along the beach brought him back to here and now. The bits of junk the tide had brought in, trying to deposit and unload the trash therein. Dermot has been up and down this beach as many times as the moon turns the tide. The beach combed through every season, past many beach party fires, alit or smouldering the ashes from the last embers. Many moons came and went from crystal clear to blood, from pale to haze with the circle halo ring that surrounded the moon, from harvest to the crescent of a smile-slit sky that rained stars to this beach in silicone twinkle. Dermot scanned the beach with his eyes where he caught sight of a suitable stick. He bent down and picked up driftwood. It was smooth, white and light in weight, as if life had been taken out from it, a lost adventure. He called Ellie over and swung the stick back and forth. Ellie's eyes like buttons widened in focused sight to never leave the stick's side. Suddenly, Dermot flung the stick long and high into the air. Loyal to the stick, Ellie chased without question and brought it back. The lapping wave, lap slap, the lapdog dropped the stick at his feet. Dermot once again picked it up. He was about to throw it again when his eyes caught sight of this form mounted upon the rocks. It looked as though someone with long hair was sitting on the rocks, looking out to the ocean. It looked odd to Dermot, so he decided to take a look and slowly walk towards the rocks in the distance. The wind blew hard upon Dermot's face, and his eyebrows scrunched down. He soon approached as it started to take shape, to give way to its true form, which was a large branch that had drifted in with the tide. Chunks and straps of amber brown, dark olive green seaweed clung to it. Ah, so that's what it is. He looked at its form that resembled a female composition, with a head and seaweed hair. The thick end of the branch had wedged between the rocks that imitated the legs bent as she sat in admiration, hypnotized to the distant horizon and to welcome the turbulent winds that imaginably blew upon her face. Suddenly, the winds brought a singing voice. His heart raced, followed by a wave of goose pimples that ran up his back and arms. Dermot then pulled tighter the two cords, ruffling tight his hood's edging. He then zipped up his coat higher to cover his neck. Ellie started to tug at the thinner parts of the branch, growling. Grrr! Dermot looked over and whistled. Come on, Ellie, let's not stick around. He walked off with Ellie bounding on ahead with sudden leaps. Slightly further up the beach, Dermot sees a hole dug into the sand, with rocks circling. Ashes remained under charcoal black and half-burnt driftwood, perhaps from a fire the night before due to the beautiful weather that led into the evening. Dermot kicked over a stone. A powdered ash dust spored into the air to be carried with the wind. Then the voice returned in the wind, singing a song that he had never heard before. The sun lightened through the clouds to ignite and harness, as if a dimmer switch had been turned up. The wind continued to carry the song, and Dermot lifted his hand to his ear and cupped his palm and fingers around to listen. Little bits of sand also came with the wind, which had dislodged from sand dunes that stretched behind him. The grains of sand stung his face, and as he turned his head away from the wind, the singing stopped. Suddenly a man comes from a small path between two sand dune hills with his dog. Windy morning, isn't it? Dermot was still half dazed from hearing the voice that sung in the wind, just stared at the man. The man walked over and said, "Are you okay there?" Dermot blinked and shook his head. Yeah. It is a windy morning." The man had a walking stick and pushed it into the ashes and said, "These young people leave all their rubbish lying around. I had just walked past and empty beer cans just up yonder." The man then lifted his stick to the direction of the sand dunes. Suddenly the singing once again came with the wind, and Dermot raised his hand and said, "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Singing." The man looked around and listened, then shook his head from side to side. "No, I am sorry, but I hear nothing." "Strange. I have been hearing singing coming from somewhere since I've come on to the beach." The man's dog started playfully barking, which then started Ellie off as they chased each other around. The dogs bounded towards the sand dunes, and both Dermot and the man whistled to their dogs. "Ellie, don't go far!" And the man shouted, "Benji, we have already been that way, silly boy." The man turned his head back to Dermot and said, "That's not a full Labrador, is it?" "No, believe it or not, there is German Shepherd in her as well." The man nodded. I knew she wasn't a full breed, but beautiful dog." The man's dog was as golden as the beach sand on a beautiful day, with wavy longish hair, and Dermot smiled. "Yeah, thanks. Your golden retriever is a great dog. I've always wanted one myself." Ellie's black nose pointed in Dermot's direction with her ears erected like two radars, and her button dark brown eyes looked at him. "But how could you not love her, hey?" The man laughed. "Yeah, they have us melted like butter." Dermot breathed in. "Indeed, spoilt rotten." He gazed on Ellie and continued, "It is annoying that when buying birthday or Christmas cards that it is always a photo of a pedigree. All the food products also have pedigrees on them. It's as if the mongrels are persecuted." The man laughed. "Yeah, it is true. Perhaps we'll see all the mongrels sometime protesting at the city hall, calling for a bill to be implemented for equal rights." They both laughed, their heads nodding to the motion of their shoulders. For a moment or two, the mood and atmosphere had changed to a light-hearted thoughts, and certainly warmed the morning up for both men. The man once again whistled, "Come on, boy," then turned to Dermot and continued, "Anyway, I hope you solve the singing mystery. I must be off. I am picking up my wife at 11 a.m. Dermot bent over and grabbed hold of Ellie at the collar. He lifted his hand and waved. "Sure, all the best. Maybe see you again." The man walked off and turned for a last wave, but Dermot stood there with his hand rubbing his chin. He continued to hear that singing, which was a little faint at the minute. He looked at the path the man had come from, which was Dermot's usual walk that led up through the sand dunes and back around. But today he wanted to follow the song in the wind, to see where it would lead him. Dermot knelt to look at the shell that caught his eye. Various kinds scattered this beach, such as cockle shells and the fine ear-shaped talons. There was the beauty of deep blue mussels shells with their mother-of-pearl lining, a literal silver lining that secreted from the mollusk that once lived within, to protect from its parasites. Limpets made Dermot blush. He had always thought them to be mermaid nipple caps. He had early memories fooling around, holding them up to his chest, imitating a covering for the mermaids. If one was lucky, you would find pieces of an oyster shell, or even mermaid purses, which is in actual fact shark egg cases to hold their laid eggs in. But on this occasion he had found a slipper limpet. He rubbed and blew the sand off, rotating it in his hand and inspecting it. He mumbled, "Great, it is not broken." Dermot only collected the shells he liked and were not badly damaged. Then a gust of wind once again carried the singing to his ears, and he looked up and noticed Ellie was sniffing around the remains of yesterday's fire and seemed to have picked up a scent. Dermot smiled. "You hear it too, Ellie? Let me guess, you also want to investigate." Dermot got up, placed the shell in his pocket and started to walk further up the beach, following the beautiful yet haunting voice that had enchanted him. He whistled, "Come on, girl." Dermot took a deep breath and let out gently, looking and admiring the moody morning weather, which gave a mysterious atmosphere, the sombre wandering of the wading birds that try to stand ground with their excavating beaks, the seagulls flapping into the wind, their wings beating aimlessly, and eventually the gulls just had to surf the wind, gliding to ride with arched and tilted wings, trying to stay on the streams of the wind. Dermot looked to the waves that had sprays on the top, deep teal underbelly with a churn of foamed white rolled a roar. The singing came and went, but it got a little louder each time it returned. The rain got a little heavier, tapping on his coat's hood, which made it harder to hear the singing. Dermot looked forward, and in the distance, through the haze of the rain, he saw a figure that stood looking down at a largish object that had washed up upon the shore. Dermot approached, and the young woman looked around at him and smiled. Dermot smiled back and said, "Is that a rocking chair?" "Yeah, an old antique one." They both stood there, looking down at the rocking chair, and Dermot then turned and looked at the woman. For all that he could see with her coat and hood covering her, she seemed bewildered, her eyes wide, her cheeks red glow, and her nose had a drip hanging. "Are you okay? You seem a bit lost." She once again turned and looked at Dermot and said, "This chair has my name carved on it." Dermot stepped forward and slightly bent over and noticed letters carved into the back of the chair, which spelt Barbara Ann. He turned around and said, "It's nice to meet you, Barbara Ann." Barbara Ann smiled. "Thank you. And what is your name?" "My name is Dermot." She then said, "I cannot understand why this chair is in such good condition, having been out in the ocean." Dermot's hand went up to his chin. He rubbed and said, "Maybe someone had dumped it here." Barbara Ann replied, "Maybe, but why dump such a beautiful piece of furniture?" "Yeah, it is a nice find. What will you do with it?" "I'll just take it home and get it cleaned up, and my name is already on it, which is handy." Ellie was sniffing around the bottom of Barbara Ann's jeans. She stepped back. "Oh, where did you come from?" Dermot smiled. "Oh, that's just Ellie. She won't hurt you. She is just very cheeky and will jump up and muddy your clothes very easily." Barbara Ann turned her head and looked at Dermot and said, "Have I seen you before?" "Maybe, I've lived here all my life, born and raised here. Barbara Ann nodded. Yeah, me too, but I have just moved back after losing my parents. I'm sorry to hear that. If you need a pair of ears to listen, we can meet up for coffee. She smiled. Yeah, I would like that. I no longer have any friends living around here. She then turned back to the chair and continued, this might be a little strange to ask, but during the course of your walk, have you by any chance heard some haunted singing? Dermot's eyes lit up. Yes, I have asked a man out walking the same question, but stated that he heard nothing, though I cannot hear it now. Me neither, but it did lead me here. Dermot laughed. Yeah, it has been a spooky morning. Barbara Ann turned her head back to Dermot and said, would you give me a hand in carrying this back up to my car? Yeah, sure, I would most gladly. Barbara Ann walked around to the ocean side of the chair and said, thanks. Dermot grabbed the other side. After 3. 1, 2, 3. They both lifted together and walked side by side, treading carefully over the uneven sand. Ellie, wagging her tail, followed and barked at them as they carried this cumbersome object. Dermot scrunched his eyebrows and said, the wood is still heavy. The sea water has not washed out the natural oils of the wood. As I am sure you know, driftwood is much light due to being so dried out. Barbara Ann nodded. Yeah, so this chair has only appeared, I am sure overnight, as anybody would give this piece a home. Dermot smiled. Yeah, like me, I would have certainly kept it. Barbara Ann replied, but having my name on it, I just feel it was supposed to be me to find it first. Suddenly, Dermot got a grain of sand in his eye. Ah, I need to set the chair down. What's wrong? A bit of sand in my eye. Barbara Ann stepped close to Dermot and saw that his eyes were watering and angrily red. I would not rub it if I was you. Just blink. Barbara tilted her head. I see it. Hold still. She lifted her hand, elegant and petite, and gently pulled down the underneath skin of the eye, and with her other hand, delicate and soft, her fingerprint pad brushed away the grain. Dermot blinked. Ah, that is better. He could now see her hands, her nails short, and she appeared to be a tomboy. Thank you very much. He took a deep breath. Onwards and upwards, they both regained their positions and continued to carry the rocking chair to her car. Barbara Ann's car was a silver Ford Fiesta that sat lonely in the car park. Dermot looked to Ellie and whistled, keep close, though it is a very quiet morning and not many cars are about. Ellie was a very biddable dog, and she seemed to understand. They finally rested down gently the rocking chair, and they let out a sigh each. Barbara Ann soon had the boot open and the back seats down, and they both had the rocking chair safely in. Dermot stood there and folded his arms. Well, that's it then. He suddenly looked around frantically. Oh, where is Ellie? He started to whistle, and Ellie came from behind the other side of the car. Dermot let out a sigh. Ah, there you are. He bent over and put Ellie back on the lead, and soon had his other hand in his pocket. Barbara Ann smiled. I'll be seeing you then. Dermot took a deep breath and said, do you want my number to meet up sometime? Oh, yeah, sure. I have a pen in the car. She opened the passenger side of the door and rummaged around in the glove compartment. Ah, here it is. Dermot had a receipt he brought out of his pocket, and after being given the pen, soon had his number wrote down. Dermot passed the receipt back to Barbara Ann's hand, and their eyes lingered. She had the most beautiful deep brown eyes. He held on to his side of the receipt, and she held on to the other. A frozen moment. A laugh and a smile brought them back to reality. Barbara Ann got into the car and wound down the window, and as she drove off, she waved out of the window, and of course, Dermot reciprocated with his returned wave, as if the ocean rolls in its waves time and time again. Well, that's all that I'm going to read for now on that story. Basically, it's the first start of the story starts off, like 300 years ago, when the great galleons were around riding the oceans. This captain went mad, and he owned this rocking chair. But basically, the rocking chair does have haunted qualities about it. But and this song certainly brought them together. And perhaps it was the song that the captain used to sing, like a shanty song. So it is a lovely story as well. So I hope you've enjoyed that. So thank you for listening. Bye.